Good morning, this is Dana Dito from my office in Astoria, Oregon, and I've been thinking this morning about how painful the misunderstandings in relationship are for folks dealing with addiction or alcoholism or codependence. I guess that's the word they always use now for people who love them. I think alcoholics and addicts and people who are labeled codependents all chafe under those labels because everybody knows they're way more than the painful experience that this introduces into life. That said, I guess we have to use language somehow to communicate, so we'll use the labels, knowing that they're inadequate. And that itself brings me to the thing I've been thinking about, which is how painful the misunderstandings are that result from addiction. Addiction is one of those things that people talk about in a rational way and is a completely overwhelming, powerful experience that takes over every bit of life. Oh, that's true, too, for the codependent. And so it is a huge, huge experience, and it's full of the feelings of isolation and misunderstanding, loneliness and pain, and also an attempt to feel better. It's a complicated and difficult subject for everyone, but people are involved, and so it's a visceral experience for people and a confusing one. For the person who is the addicted person or the alcoholic, their struggle is solitary in many ways because they're up against an adversary who promises them relief and help and who takes over their life. I think about the fact that it is so different to have an alcoholic or addict part of yourself than to be part of the alcoholic addict part of yourself, because when an addict or an alcoholic uses, that part of them is energized, comes to life, pushes them out of the way, and takes over and starts managing things. And so the price that is extracted from the addiction is huge. But the person behind that still feels present, still has the usual expectations for people to understand and care for them and love them. And they also are at the mercy of this thing that has taken over their life. And so when it steals from people or lies to people or cheats people, the person inside of that part becomes increasingly invisible to other people and also alone. And the addict or alcoholic still has a real need to be able to come in contact with other people, but that really isn't possible when you're using. And what happens is that other people, when they look at you, particularly people who love you, can't connect. And there is a very, very deep primal need for human beings to resonate with each other. That's with us when we're born. We have a need to be in resonance with our mother and other people. And the addictive process itself interrupts that. We talk about addiction rationally, of course, because, well, we have to do that, you know? I mean, we have to have a language, right? We have to have a map for a territory. This territory, however, is very, very difficult. And maps that are useful on it takes that into consideration. So the whole prospect of losing connection is huge and feeling misunderstood. And so the person who loves the addict or alcoholic, when that other person starts using, they start feeling desperate or more compliant or fearful or angry or resentful, who knows? But all of those feelings are in response to the disconnection, for not being able to hold on to that person, to be able to talk to them, to be able to have a flow back and forth. But that flow is interrupted. And so when the alcoholic or addict uses or makes a decision to use, that part takes over their life and they start to disappear from other people's view. And they start feeling more isolated and more understood and more hurt, which of course energizes the addiction even more and makes the person feel like there's really no hope of anyone really caring. But all of this happens because really they have become part of a part, and they are becoming invisible. And the codependent, that person who loves them, is also disappearing because they will have a response of fear, anxiety, and the need to hold on. You know, this is so minimized by people who look on from the outside and who don't really understand what it's like to be in that position. When you're in the codependent position, it's like being beside a quicksand pool, watching the person you love go down and having no arms. And so you stick your toes in. You might even jump in, but you can't get them out. It's really an awful experience for both people. Both people feel increasingly misunderstood and hurt. All the while, the addiction carries on and increases. And the addict feels guilty, but you know, addiction has a life of its own. It's very much like a state of possession. You remember old Mr. Hyde? Well, everybody has the potential for Mr. Hyde, but Mr. Hyde is very energized by fear, isolation, loneliness, and lying. Shame? Mr. Hyde is only interested in getting what he wants. But Mr. Hyde is not Dr. Jekyll. The trouble is Dr. Jekyll disappears because unless he reveals Mr. Hyde to everyone, unless he tells the truth and accepts the fact that Mr. Hyde is in there, unless an addict or alcoholic can look in the mirror and say, I have an alcoholic or addict part, then he's at the mercy of it. You see, there's no shame in having a part, but when you feed it because of pain or fear or whatever lie Mr. Hyde tells you, well, then you become a part of a part and disappear, and then it becomes painful for you, and it feels like it's your fault, but there are only moments of choice, you know? That's why truth is so important and so scary. Mr. Hyde, he doesn't like truth, and also for the person who loves the addict or alcoholic, to stay open-hearted and see what's right in front of you, to be willing to accept the fact that you can't even get in the pool where the addict or alcoholic is. That's equally hard. Both people are at the mercy of the thing. Human beings are full of basic human goodness. But it's hard to get in touch with that because addiction and fear make it invisible. I hope you have a good day, and if you're struggling with these things, take a risk to tell somebody. There's a lot to be said for the light. It feels scary, but it's actually the only safe place. Bye-bye.